Couple of housekeeping issues. Remember that we are providing CEUs for social worker credit, nursing, psychology, and Act 48. So if you've signed up, you know. If you haven't signed up and want to, I don't think it's too late unless someone's going to slap my hand for saying that. But those of you who have signed up for psychology, please see Sherry McConnell at the desk at some point. There's some kind of revision in one of the assessments that you need to talk to her about. So if you're doing psychology credits, talk to Sherry outside. And just by the way, thank you to Sherry McConnell and Sandy Kyler out there. They're probably out there. When they come back in, we'll give them another big round of applause. We'll do it again, but all of the CEUs are courtesy of these two women who've put this together. It's a monumental feast to get all these CEUs working. So thank you, guys. Is this where you want to start, David, on this?
Yep.
Okay. So let's get started again. It's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. David Wolfe. Anyone who's in our field knows David's name is synonymous with prevention, and David has been a pillar in our field for many, many years, and a longtime editor of our flagship journal, editor-in-chief of Child Abuse and Neglect, the International Journal, until 2013. And I think under David's direction, that journal has really transformed into something that's got a larger impact, a wider scope and breadth, and increased rigor. So thank you for that hard work. That's a thankless task, anyone who's edited knows. So David Wolfe has been the author of many books, many seminal texts. He's a psychologist by training, specializing in issues that affect children and youth, focusing specifically on child abuse, dating violence, and mental health and well-being. He was a professor of psychology at Western University until 2012, where he was the academic director of the Center for Research and Education on Violence Against Women and Children in their Faculty of Education. In 2004, he both started and now directs the Center for Prevention Science located in London, Ontario. David has pioneered new approaches to preventing many of societal youth problems, including bullying, relationship violence, substance abuse, and his tact is really through universal education programs. The program that he's going to talk about today, the fourth R, is now in 5,000 schools in Canada and the US, and that's a monumental feat and something we hope to learn from David as the day goes by and at the end of tomorrow when we talk about wider implementation and impacting systems. His work has been recognized by UNESCO and several other professional organizations for his contributions in eliminating violence against women and children. So here we have David Wolfe.
Thank you very much, Jenny. Any Canadians in the room?
Oh, happy Thanksgiving.
Yes, my Thanksgiving today, so they're all back up north, and I'm here. Very happy to be so. Other than the fact that my first daughter is getting married on Saturday, so I said to Jenny, this is going to be a bit of a family favor, I think, when I come down here. I'm delighted to be here. I'm also pleased to see that prevention was put at the beginning of this agenda. I have never, ever seen that in my 36 years of doing this. We're always kind of at the end as an afterthought. My belief is that prevention should be the forethought, obviously. How many in the audience are educators? I'm just curious. Okay, goodly number. My background was in child abuse and neglect, and I worked with physical abuse in the beginning, and I worked with kids who witnessed violence in the home throughout the 80s, and Peter Daffy and I wrote a book on it called Children of Battered Women, the term of the day. Then we worked with sexually abused children in the 80s and 90s. Now I'm working with a lot of adult survivors of that, sadly. They're just all over the place. And one thing that I want to bring to your attention right from the beginning is all of these issues, physical abuse, sexual abuse, elder abuse, dating violence, sexual assault, are all very much tied together by one common element, and it's relationships. These are things that kids get into. When we're talking about adolescence, a lot of these things have a relationship tie, and that's why we have the program we call the 4th R for relationships. The other thing I wanted to point out right from the beginning, in my belief, is that these things are all preventable, a lot more than treatable. We have to keep that in mind. We spend a lot of money on the treatment or prosecution of these important issues, but do we begin to spend enough time on the prevention? They are 100% or close to 100% preventable if we really set it up the way we should and the way we know how. And I want to show you some of those ideas today. And it's a lot cheaper and a lot less harm done if we work at the prevention point of view. There are many prevention opportunities, as we know. There's universal and targeted that happen before anything happens or soon after or when we believe it's going to happen. And then once abuse and trauma happens, there's many other forms of prevention that we've already spoken about. Prevention of reoccurrence and prevention of impairment. So prevention covers that whole gamut. I'm going to talk about that first part, the universal. I believe that all kids need some inoculation around these topics. And I also believe the topics are connected, so you don't have to inoculate about bullying alone, or sexual abuse alone, or dating violence alone. You inoculate around the common elements, and that's how to have healthy relationships without those types of problems. Pardon me. Getting all clogged up. Theoretically, I believe that educators carry a big key in terms of how we're going about dealing with the prevention of child abuse and neglect and all these other related issues. When I started this topic, when I started the issue of adolescence back in the early 1990s, David Olds was working with infants, and I thought that's the most important part of prevention is early childhood. Like, get the parents in there early and really try to help them manage their kids properly. That's what my background was. But I thought, he's already doing that, so what else am I going to do that's different? And I looked around, and at the time I had 3 young kids, and I thought, well, I know a lot about adolescence, so I'll focus on adolescence. I no longer knew much about little kids. Then they became adolescents, and that all changed. But in the early 1990s, I started a program called the Youth Relationships Program to focus on kids' healthy relationships as they transition into adolescence. It's such a critical point. So theoretically, this is an important window of opportunity. Early adolescence to mid-adolescence, I think, is a key element. We've been missing that topic. We haven't spent enough time on it. We wait until the kids have problems, and then we try to fix them. But there's so much we can do to help them get through this period of time. So I'm going to take my watch off for a second and make sure I don't lose track of what I'm saying here. Thanks. This is a time of autonomy, transition, experimentation. Their job, if you will, is to move away from what their parents are like and move more into the peer group, but they're supposed to carry that with them. Developmentalists tell us that kids' relationships carry forward. What you form is an early childhood and middle child carry forward into your next relationships. And if they were good relationships, of course, you're going to carry that forward, but if they were bad, you may not. Adolescents are exposed to experiment. They're supposed to try on new things. But the question is, how do we keep them safe in doing that? How do they take risks and still remain safe? There's pressure to conform at this age, as we know. They need some help in terms of how are they supposed to fit in, because they're supposed to conform with others, but at the same time be really different. And this notion of gender role rigidity returns with a vengeance. When kids are little, when I got some here. When kids are young, very young, gender role rigidity plays a role. They figure out girls do this, boys do that, men do this, women do that, and it's a gender role aspect. But they grow out of it as they get older. And what I discovered in researching a lot of this for a book in 2008 was that gender role rigidity comes back when they're once again faced with an unknown outcome or environment. What do I do here? How do I figure out how the world works when I'm in 7th, 8th, and 9th grade? I better act like a boy. I better act like a girl. I better act like what I think my friends think a boy should act like, more importantly. So they are confused. They need some information. And unfortunately, they get tons of it out there provided by everything from social media to music videos and so forth about how boys and girls are supposed to act. And it's not usually very nice. So we haven't done enough to give them alternative models of that, to educate them. And it doesn't have to be in early adolescence, of course. I'll talk about in a minute, it can start a lot earlier than that and should. It really should. But this is where we began because of the opportunity. And they start patrolling the borders. They watch each other and to see if you fit my image of what a boy should look like or a guy should do. If you don't, then you're gay. And this homophobia aspect is a way that they try to make sure that other people fit their role or image of what a girl or a boy should be like. And of course, it's very exclusionary and often abusive. They don't know how to signal intimacy very well, especially if they've grown up in abusive relationships. They think that being in love means that you could be hurt or you are hurt. That's part of it. So these are just a taste of some of the things that drew me to adolescence before I had any adolescence, and made it a very important point, I think, for education. Along with that, let's just quickly mention these principles of universal prevention. We know from many universal prevention studies in other fields, other related topics, you have to have proper dosage, timing, delivery, content, and setting. You can't just have a program and go out and give it to everybody unless it's well-timed and the program is matched to that age group and so forth. And even though that sounds very sensible, it's often not done because it's not all that easy unless you plan it in advance. My belief is all youth, your kids, my kids, and the bad kids, so to speak, the ones that maybe you don't want your kids hanging around, they all need education about healthy, nonviolent relationships. There's nothing wrong with that. There's no kickback. There's no concern by parents. Everybody needs a dose of this. It's not always enough for everybody, but it puts everybody at a much higher level than they would have been otherwise. They need accurate information without scare messages, and they need personal value clarification. They need limit and boundary setting. They need to know what these limits are, like others have said. So this brought us about 15 years ago. We started the program called the 4th R, and I want to quickly tell you what I think is different about it, or how we tried to achieve what we did. We called it the Adolescent Risk Triad, made up of peer and dating violence, unhealthy sexual behavior, and substance misuse. And all three of these things swim the common sea we call relationships. As I say, kids don't get in trouble with substance misuse on their own or with sex on their own. They get in trouble because they're trying to fit in with others or do what they think others expect them to do and to have adult privileges. Some kids get into trouble because of one of those, so they're brought down to the principal's office because they were in a dating violent relationship or they did something with their partner. Another one gets in trouble because of drinking. And then there's some that get in trouble because of both or all three. But these things travel in packs, and it's an important concept that's been around since the 70s, but the notion that these overlap and that we have to give up that idea that we can help adolescents by focusing only on one problem behavior at a time. It doesn't work very well that way. Sometimes you have to, but keep in mind our job, if we're going to be preventionists, is to deal with the whole adolescent and recognize what they're trying to go through here is forming healthy relationships. And in so doing, they might show risk behaviors, problem behaviors. Our job isn't just to tackle the problem behaviors, but to teach them about what expectations are, how to have the healthy relationship that they're trying to develop, that we want them to develop. And lately we added to this notion the concept of mental health and well-being. The importance of this hardly needs to be stated, but early adolescents also need some understanding of what well-being is. What does it mean? Basic concepts like healthy relationships. What is anxiety? What does it feel like to be nervous or angry? How do I express it appropriately? This isn't about mental illness. It's not about defining depression. It's about helping them understand how to be the person they want to be and have a vision of that in their mind by talking about it in their classrooms. So that's, if you will, the theoretical background of what brought us to the fourth R, and then the well-being was added on more recently. And here I'll go over our approach for a moment. We started in 2001, as I mentioned, when we wanted to bring a small group program called the Youth Relationship Program into the classroom. As many of you do, researchers anyway, we always want to get in the classroom. So my colleague Peter was a school board trustee, and he said, well, I know a really good teacher. He'll come and talk to you about how to do that. So Ray came in one day at a lunch meeting. You always have to buy teacher's lunch, right? Sorry, yeah, it works. And Ray came in, the first thing he said is, teachers won't do that. It's not in the curriculum. So what do you mean they won't do it? Don't they want to do it? Don't they believe in it? Well, of course they do, but they have to teach the curriculum. We said, well, how do we make that happen? He said, well, I can write it so it works with the curriculum. I said, okay, and he did it over the summer with another teacher. He took our concepts and put it into education language and made a lot of the skills you'll see today were their ideas. But the important concept here that I don't want anyone to misunderstand is that this is delivered by teachers and it meets the curriculum standards for Ontario, for all other provinces and all states in the US. The reason is the curriculum standards are very broad. And it'll say things like in grade 9, thou shalt teach safety skills. And that shall involve things like refusal skills, negotiation skills. But it doesn't say how to do it. So we showed them how to do it. And then the teachers are very appreciative. Oh, that's nice. I don't have to go and figure this out or invite someone else in to do it. We made it very easy for them. Pardon me. Allergy season. So what we wanted was to help youth strengthen their relationship skills and assist them in making safe and responsible choices. This is sort of the background of the content in the program. We want to address the common elements of adolescence, what we call the goals of adolescence and the multiple risk factors. We want them to have some time to discuss what they're going through, if you will. The bullying, the homophobia, the name calling, the sexism. We want to talk about it. We want boys and girls to talk about it together. We want them to be honest about it, and we don't want to preach. We don't want to judge. We want them to feel some responsibility and some commitment to this. We want to counteract those pro-abuse messages that they're swimming in on a daily basis. And unfortunately, some adults remain swimming in it. Gender, race, sexual orientation issues that people get hung up with and think that that is part of the enemy, that that's something that they don't understand. And we want to emphasize a positive message of safety and harm reduction. Prepare them and not scare them is the way I like to phrase it. When my kids were adolescents, I remember it was such an easier message to say is, where are you going tonight? Because I want you to be safe. As opposed to, where are you going tonight? And if I catch you somewhere else or I catch you drinking, this will happen to you. Kids just learn how to avoid those messages. They want to feel like they can trust you, and if they're in trouble, they can seek your help as an adult or as a peer. We want to provide opportunities for them to develop assets and strengths, or build their, what we call building youth connections. So those are the principles behind the program. The content was based on these, on the curriculum guidelines, as I mentioned. There's federal guidelines in the US. Every state modifies them slightly, so we modify our program for every state. Right now, Texas is the biggest state using it. They just were funded to do a RCT there. And I love it, by the way, when other people are doing them, and I don't have to anymore, because I just retired, actually. I'm happy to say. I'm still doing this, but no one's paying me. So we modify it for each state, or even different boards, because Catholic schools teach sexuality different than non-Catholic schools, for example. So it's important that things can be modified. You don't want a Canadian program coming into areas where the people look different, sound different, dress differently. So we modify that, and I'll show you in a minute how that's done. That's the easiest part and the funnest part in many ways. You have to match the content and skills with the curriculum requirements, as I mentioned, and these are usually in physical health and education. Not always. Here's how that came about. When Ray said to me 15 years ago that we have to match it to the curriculum, I said, well, how do we do that? And he said, well, just coincidentally, they had just revised the curriculum. And for the first time ever in Ontario, they said, you know what, we're going to teach 9th graders about personal safety and health. Now think how radical that is. Personal safety is taught all through elementary school. Wear your seatbelts, don't talk to strangers. Hold someone's hand when you're crossing the street. Wear a bike helmet. That's personal safety. And then they get into middle school and high school, you don't need that anymore. You're old enough, you know how to do that. And it's the most dangerous time in their life. It really is, especially for girls and guys for fights. So they said, well, we should teach this in the 9th grade. So we started in the 9th grade because that's where the curriculum was back then. In the personal safety, there's sexual violence and so forth, but we're not talking about sexual assaults and sexual violence other than examples of extremes and the boundaries that we have to teach. We're talking about personal responsibilities and goals, limit setting and so forth. The second, then that curriculum, by the way, in Ontario and a lot of other areas covers 28 hours of class time, or sorry, 8 class periods, which is about 10 hours per class, or per section. So it's about 8 classes to cover just that. And then there's another 8 on substance use and another 8 on healthy growth and sexuality. My belief is that kids need all of these things, and they need them connected by relationship issues. So it's not so disconnected that you go and you learn about sex, but you never talk about the relationship. You learn about drugs and alcohol, but you never talk about how you get in trouble with them in terms of trying to fit in with your peers and so forth. So we try to carry through the concept of relationship skills that we teach them in the beginning, and you apply them to different topics. So when you see the video in a minute, you'll see them applied to different topics. We try to involve not only the youth, but teachers. As I said, it's delivered by teachers and parents and the community. The community can have a role. We don't have time to get into that today, unfortunately, but parents can also have a role. They're the most difficult to reach. Those of you work in this area know that parents show up when there's a problem, and they don't when it's just everything's going tickety-boo. So we give some homework assignments so that parents are supposed to actually engage with the child in discussing some of these topics. And we integrate skill development and role play. This is taught in physical health and education. It's now taught in grades 7, 8, and 9. We have an English version I'll mention in a minute, but this is where we teach most of the skills. And that's logical because it's taught by people who are used to teaching skills. Basketball and volleyball and soccer and everything else is a skill-based thing. You don't talk about it inside alone. You have to practice it. So it makes sense because this is something that kids have to practice through role play. As I say, they process the issues through partner, small group, and whole class. So currently, these are the resources we have. I'm sorry, that's a little hard to see. Really hard to see. We have in the school-based program of the 4th hour, we have grades 7, 8, and 9 that's taught in health class, and it's adapted for each state. There are several states using it, but right now we try to develop it in states that have a local spokesperson, someone who can help coordinate it in that. There's Catholic and French versions. There's grade 9, 10, 11, and 12 English versions. We have not evaluated. The English teachers are very interested in integrating these concepts into English in the curriculum, where you're supposed to read about conflict in a novel. Then the kids can pick their own novels, or they have other novelettes that we provide for them to talk or to read about adolescent issues. And then we have the Healthy Relationship Plus program, which can be done in the school or after school, and it's a small group. It's aimed for either schools or communities that don't have the resources or interest in doing it in the classroom. They can do it in a small group. But I always warn, it's not a treatment program. If you